Hi, my name is Susan Alexander, and I didn't have a choice when it came to retiring.
Hello, and welcome to the Redirect Podcast, where we have spirited conversations and tell stories about finding purpose in retirement. For us, retirement isn't an ending, it's a beginning. Time to redirect your energy, wisdom, and passion toward new horizons. Whether you've recently retired, are planning for that transition, or are years into this journey, this podcast is your companion in navigating this meaningful chapter of life. Adam, Curt, it's good to be here. And honestly, it's probably good to be anywhere when you're my age. But I'm really happy to be with you guys today on the Redirect Podcast, and really excited about our conversation. But before we get into it, as always, I have a question. Have either of you ever been fired from a job? And if so, how did you deal with it? Curt, I'm going to start with you.
Well, Dale, it is great to be with you, and I'm glad that you're here today. As far as the question about being fired, yes, I have been fired. It was my second job in my career, and that was working for the Pennsylvania Special Olympics Organization. I was the director of games and competition, responsible for the state of Pennsylvania and making sure that all the athletes were training in preparation for games to be able to perform at the games with consistent rules and all that kind of stuff. Was there for a number of years, enjoyed it, a great experience. And then there was some times where we had a change of an executive director, and I was sort of hinting myself to go in that direction as a very young and cocky individual. And unfortunately did not receive a good feedback from that. And the people there advised me that they would give me 4 to 6 months in order to find something and transition on out. How I felt at the time, it was devastating. But looking back on it, I was a young kid that sort of wanted more than what he was deserved. And as a result, I had a lot of pride that was just broken down and make me realize that I wasn't as great as I thought I was. The outcome of it was phenomenal in the sense that it got me into my sales career and working with sporting goods, which I spent a 35-year career doing and was quite successful with it. So something that was devastating at the time did end up to be a very good thing in the long run.
Hey, Adam, how about you?
I think the closest I came to being fired, I was working for a company that had engaged over the course of a long period of time into some practices that were a little less than ideal for client safety. And I brought this to leadership's attention, and those conversations didn't go well. And I think they just expected me to kind of walk away from the topic. And I just couldn't. There was such a risk at the time. And so I kept pressing on it. And eventually I found myself with a new piece of paper having been slid across the table. And they said, here are your options. We have a new employment agreement offer for you, or we can go our separate ways. Take the day to think about it. And I was just stuck. I had a really good job. I enjoyed what I was doing. I was thriving in my career. And then my wife said, if that's the kind of agreement that you can be happy with and you can sleep at night, then you should sign it. It was the perfect answer. Immediately, I knew exactly what to do. I was not going to sign it. So it was very clever of her. And the next day, I was out of a job. How did I handle it? I called my friend after that conversation with my wife, and I said, hey, I'm on the street. He said, can you start at noon tomorrow? So I walked in with the declining to sign the new agreement, and I was working somewhere else by noon. I was very fortunate.
Boy, my experience a little bit different. I'd actually been part of a company that I helped start. Was there about 16 years, and the other partners wanted to go in a different direction. The business that I started, as well as the people that were working at me leading it, were let go. They didn't want to be in that business anymore. So not only did I go, so did the business, and I saw it as a massive opportunity. It was devastating. I mean, anytime you get any kind of news that somebody doesn't want what you're doing as part of the company. It's a big deal, but I knew it was a big opportunity. I went and started my own company doing just that. Best thing that ever happened, focusing strictly on just what we wanted to do. And that was creating big corporate experiences around the world, and did so. So got to get over the feeling of rejection, but see it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
And man, I did.
That's great.
And took off, and never looked back. But it was the best thing ever happened. So
Today's friend of the Redirect podcast is Susan Alexander. In 2015, Susan experienced a significant redirection when, after a 31-year career at Sotheby's, a 250-year-old company known as the world's premier destination for art and luxury through auctions and buy now channels, she was let go. Upon being released from her role as executive vice president and chief human resources officer, Susan experimented in being a consultant, being a champion of talent development, and having a reputation for identifying and celebrating the unique capabilities of others. She felt this was her next natural step. However, Susan's curiosity got the best of her when she decided to enroll in the Stanford Distinguished Careers Institute. In doing so, Susan's eyes were opened to the opportunity of learning and pursuing new interests, with one of those opportunities being becoming an ambassador for the Stanford Center on Longevity. Susan, welcome to the Redirect Podcast.
Thanks.
Susan, we're glad that you're here to tell that story, and we can't wait to hear your take on that opening question. We have discussed in the past that nuance of forced retirement and how most people, like better than half of the folks as they retire, do not retire on their own terms. Some of those stats look like 35% of early retirees have personal or family hardships, and that contributes to the end of their career. 31% retire because they were pushed out by their company, and only a third of retirees retire on their own terms. I think that's such an overlooked stat, because we tend to imagine this gradual descent from your career into a nice, easy landing on in a very comfortable spot. And it turns out that like 2/3 of folks, it's thrust upon them, either because of circumstances within their own lives that they can't control, or circumstances from the company. So you've had one of those instances, right? So why don't you tell us about your story, Susan?
Well, I thought I would be the best positioned person in the company to help a new CEO navigate this crazy world that we had created, a global company with people in 40 different countries. And on his first day, he fired me. So I was really shocked. But I have to say, after a week, I was grateful. And most of my colleagues envied me. I didn't have to watch a new CEO dismantle the amazing culture we had built over 30 years. My severance package paid off my mortgage and put my kids to grad school. And or I think everything in life is connected and organically leads us to the next opportunity. And in each of the cases you guys shared, like a door closed and a window opened. So,
let me
So-
underline, this is a 31-year career
yep, in one company.
in one company.
Yeah.
So,
rare.
Susan, it sounded like you were able to recognize the benefit of it rather quickly. But going back, do you recall some of the feelings that you had personally about, as you just said, well, how could this person? I'm going to be the right person for them to help with transition, and then he or she didn't felt that you were a part of the plan. How did that make you feel?
Well, I was stunned at first. And then I thought, okay, he's got to be an idiot because he doesn't understand
Obviously.
what I can do for him.
Right.
And I was scheduled the day after this conversation for a quick trip to California to meet some friends, one of whom was the chairman of our compensation committee. of the board, and I'd worked with him for many years. And of course, he knew that this was going to happen and he couldn't tell me. And he said, "Oh, Susan, no, no, no. I'm going to convince him. He doesn't understand. It's his first day on the job. He doesn't understand who you are, what you've done, what you can contribute." And I said, "Bobby, I don't need you to carry my water. If this guy doesn't get it, then after 31 years, I don't want to prove myself. It's just time to go." And then the whole world opened up. And looking back, I wish I'd been fired, 3 or 4 years earlier.
So Susan, you have been a part of, 31 years, you've been a part of letting a lot of people go. And in your own experience, what one thing about what you had helped others do helped you through those first moments?
Well, that's an interesting question. This fellow did like the worst job of communicating this that I have ever seen in my life. He couldn't even look at me in my eyes. He was looking at the floor. So I think just moving on, in my career, as I've had to terminate people's careers with the company, I've always treated them with empathy and with respect.
Yeah.
And many of those people are still very good friends today. Many of those people have given me opportunities in other organizations and in consulting organizations or recommended me. So I think the way in which you are respected in this process says a lot. Because he showed me so little respect, it was really clear that it was time for me to take control and move on to the next stage of life. And it was a release, a real release.
What would you say that span of time was from coming to grips with the reality, hey, I just got fired, I'm starting to heal and mend a little bit, to realizing this is a blessing. This is a new beginning. I can't wait to find out what's next, or what's next is starting to find me. How long was that span of time?
Well, I stayed for 3 months to wrap up loose ends and help him. And then I left. And I would say by the time I left, I was ready to move. And then I did all the things that I hadn't been able to do as a working mom, breadwinner, commuter, traveler. And I just had a blast. I
That's
traveled. I went to concerts. I went to my kids' water polo tournaments. Then a whole bunch of health problems in my family cropped up, and I had the freedom to be there for everyone, to manage those, to be the caretaker. And then at the end of that, I started thinking, well, is this all there is? Is retirement just having fun, doing all the things that I've been waiting to do? And then I got a text from my son that changed everything.
So you took time to travel, you did some things that you hadn't had time for, and then you said that your son sort of helped with things. What was that? What was that all about?
He sent me a text that just said, "You'd think this was cool." He was a graduate student at Stanford, a TA, and he had this old guy in his section. And one day he said, "What kind of degree are you working on?" And he told him about the Distinguished Careers Institute. So in this text was a link to that program. And I opened it and found what I didn't even know existed and what I had been looking for. And it was a program, it's a year-long program for mature professionals to focus on exploration, renewal, their next chapter. And it fed into every single thing I could have imagined I would love to do. And when I thought about, well, what else could I do? Because it was expensive, and I had to apply just like any college student. I had to write essays and get
Yeah.
recommendations and have interviews. And I thought, oh, well, I could do an around the world trip for this. I could do this. I could do that. And I thought, there's nothing I would love more than to go back to school for a year.
Had that entered into your mind at all?
These programs were very new at that time. The Stanford program was only 4 years old when I heard about it. So when I got fired was like the inaugural year of it. So it didn't even exist as a possibility at
Wow.
that time. So the synchronicity of it was just amazing. And that really set me up for everything that came next. So when I think now, looking back, I've been retired 10 years, there were really sort of 3 stages in this process so far. One was those first years of, oh, I can do all these fun things, and now I have to take care of my family. And then what's next? Then there was the Stanford experience, second stage of exploration and excitement about my future and learning all the ways that I could imagine what could come. And now this is the period of transformation. So I was lucky because this was always encouraged in my upbringing. And I was a musician. That was my identity as a kid. That's what I studied in college. You learn a lot from being in the creative arts and the performing arts. But more than that, I think it's just a part of who I am. Curiosity has always allowed me to unleash my full capabilities, become the fullest expression of myself, to see the world from new perspectives, from others' lived experiences, not just my own, to learn from the past, to imagine the future, and to connect with people and ideas. So curiosity is sort of the fuel that I run on. A day in the life of curiosity. Yesterday, I went to an amazing exhibition on Raphael at the Metropolitan Museum. Then I walked up to the Cooper Hewitt and saw an incredible exhibition of large format photographs of manufacturing operations, of making a Steinway piano, making pencils and erasers, making a jet engine. Unbelievable. Um, then a friend of mine invited me to a Hindu ceremony at her home, which is some sort of devotion of chanting and ritual for peace. I had no clue what was going on. At one point, I nodded off and opened my eyes then and realized everyone else has their eyes closed. So, okay, I wasn't busted. It was a fascinating experience to see another person's spiritual and devotional practice. And, I'm having dinner with her and we'll get the download of what that was all about later. And then somebody that I'm talking with who is at that event turns out is connected to my very best friend and all of her philanthropic interests. I mean, that all came from just doing something unknown.
But it is stepping out. Part of that curiosity is just your openness to new things. It's also taking action to put yourself in situations where you can not only learn, but make connections, and it kind of broadens your world, right?
Yes, but I think some people look at that as big risk taking. And
Mm.
I look at it as small risk taking. Those little baby steps. Start the conversation with the person next to you. How hard is that?
How would you say that element of curiosity in your life helped you in your career? And more specifically, how do you think that's going to help you as you go on in the future?
My curiosity and ability to see unusual connections and a willingness to take risks has always opened doors for me and prepared me for opportunities that I never could have imagined. The opportunity to move to New York City and work for Sotheby's when I was 30 years old, I mean, that never entered my consciousness. But today, looking backwards, I can see a very clear thread throughout my life of each thing
Mm.
leading to the next and each experience and opportunity and all the hard ones, preparing for the next. I mean, when I was at Sotheby's in 2000, there was a Department of Justice investigation began. This wasn't the first time. This time it seemed a little different. And then all of a sudden, one of our board members came to tell us that our CEO and our chairman were being removed. And over President's Day weekend, the senior leadership of the company had to figure out how to operate the company on Tuesday. Like, what can prepare you for that?
Yeah.
Nothing. How can you even imagine that could happen in your career? But all of the years up to that point, building relationships with my colleagues of trust, of authenticity, of working closely together. That's what got us through this horrific period of time. And almost all the executives and senior specialists in the company threatened to leave. Our stock went from 57 to 7. The company almost went bankrupt. And it was a nightmare. And our CEO ultimately pleaded guilty to a felony, price fixing for 5 years. 3 years later, we hit record profitability. So curiosity, resilience, authenticity, all those things for me go together in terms of who I am, how I try to weave the experiences of life into preparing for the next life opportunity or challenge.
So, Susan, you mentioned about now you look back and you see this thread. When did that awareness of that thread existing emerge in your life?
I think in my 40s, I started to realize and see the connectivity of everything. And I've always seen sort of unusual connections between people, between concepts, between ideas. But to see that in a personal context was a new experience for me.
We will rejoin our conversation in just a moment. Thank you for listening to the Redirect Podcast. We appreciate your support. Do you love what you're hearing? Don't keep it to yourself. Follow the Redirect Podcast on Apple Podcast and Spotify and never miss an episode that inspires your next chapter in life's journey. While you're there, hit a 5-star rating, leave a review, and share your favorite episode with a friend who's ready for their own life pivot. And don't forget to join the conversation on Instagram at The Redirect Podcast. Comment, tag us, and let us know how you are redirecting your journey. Now let's get back to today's conversation.
When you say the word risk, how do you overcome the risk component because of the potential fallout of saying that it's okay, it's all right to be risky and to move and to try new things because I don't know what else could happen? How do you settle in that?
I guess it's like, what's the worst that could happen? I have never felt completely qualified for any job I ever took. But I always thought, well, if I'm the best candidate they can find, if this is the best they can do, I'll give it a shot. Like they're the one making the mistake if it if it blows up.
What can they do? Fire me?
Yeah, but what's the worst that can happen? And I had a lot of experiences in my earlier decades where I took risks and they paid off. And things that I didn't even realize at that time were risks. Other people told me that they had been risky. I just thought, well, in a naive kind of way, they want to know what I think. I'm going to tell them. I mean, I did an internship at General Motors during my MBA program where at the end of the program, we had to give presentations on our summer experiences. And I talked about what it was like to see their organization through the eyes of a musician. And I played my violin at General Motors. That then turned into so many different things that made my head spin. It was a bad idea, a good idea, a bad idea, a good idea. And at the end, my boss asked me to make him a promise before I left. And I said, anything, you've given me such an opportunity. And he said, promise me you'll never work for General Motors. And I was shocked. I thought, oh my gosh, this has been a real mistake. And he said, no. He said, they'll say whatever it takes to hire you, but you don't belong here. You need to find somewhere where you can bring your full self to work, where you will be celebrated for your capabilities. And that is in General Motors. So your job is to find that place. And it took 10 years, but I found it at Sotheby's. And then I stayed there for 30 years.
That was awesome to have somebody like that in a position that person was, that was not necessarily thinking of the corporate entity, but was thinking of you, the person, and sort of saying, we don't want to clip your wings. You need to go other places. That's a tremendous advice.
And I think I love the point that you made, Susan, for everybody out there. taking risks can be just a little risk. Go ahead and get experience taking risks. You do have to be a little bit par crazy. And I think you've got to have a confidence in yourself and kind of knowing a little bit about yourself. And the best way to do anything is to go do it and get some experience with it. And the bigger risks become easier when you've done some of the smaller ones, and they either paid out or not, but you learned. You'll learn something.
And I think that has application for people approaching retirement or in retirement, that it's okay that there's risk. It's okay that it might not work out. It's okay that it might be a complete failure. But there's also a chance at success. There's also a chance at growth. There's also a chance at you stepping into something you couldn't even imagine. But like you said, Dale, stepping out, and to complement Susan's take on risk, if you're still breathing, you still got a chance to do something impactful. So why not?
So Susan, talk about some of those opportunities that happen once you really kind of got a little clarity. You went to Stanford. Talk about those opportunities that came up because you did take a little bit of risk.
Well, I moved across the country to Palo Alto and sat in classes with some of the smartest kids in the world in Silicon Valley, like way out of my comfort zone. And I found all these we could take any class that we wanted on campus, and you name it, I took it. And I found the most interesting synchronicity at the end of a semester of how all these different classes connected with each other and what I was learning and how that was changing the way I was thinking about my future. I took classes at the Longevity Institute. So Stanford has a longevity center that's focused not on how much longer can we live, but on the fact that we are living longer, but we don't have structures that are built to support this. Our social security system, our education systems are not designed for 100-year lives. If you could design education all over again, would you really spit out at age 18, try to figure out what you're going to do, get some kind of professional training for 3 or 4 years, and then stop learning? Like, of course not. That makes no sense. But in every domain of our lives, we are still stuck with old-fashioned structures that don't actually help us thrive. So being made aware of these kinds of concepts, I hadn't even thought about these things before. So when I left, I applied to be an ambassador for the Longevity Center. And now I'm part of a community of people that work to socialize the work that the center's doing about scientific discoveries and tech advances and behavioral practices. So these century-long lives are healthy and rewarding. I answered an ad to be a mentor for the Dalai Lama Fellows Program. Never heard of that program. It's a group of young social entrepreneurs around the world who are selected every year, 15 to 20 of these. And they go through a year-long curriculum, not unlike my year-long Stanford experience. And then they get a mentor to help them with their project and a mentor to help them develop their own wellness practices. So I'm a project mentor, and I now have this unbelievable stable of these bright young things from all over the world who are pursuing all kinds of interesting projects in their communities. And they keep me young. I see the world through their perspectives, from someone in India, from someone in Nigeria, from someone in Poland. Never could have imagined that. And the Stanford program was actually created by the former dean of the medical school as his retirement passion project, based on the research from both the medical school and the longevity center. And 3 pillars: community, purpose, wellness, define this program. And at the end, sort of, if you fill up those 3 buckets in your life in a way that's meaningful, you're going to have a great next chapter. So I got stuck there during COVID and went online like every other student around the world, which was an experience I wasn't expecting. Then came back to the East Coast during COVID and had the opportunity to try to put all that in practice. How do you do that with the constraints of COVID?
Ugh.
And so even that was a laboratory for this Stanford experience that was completely unexpected.
You explained to us and how you were working with a lot of young people, and obviously you've had more experience than them in the work world and such. Was there a generational difference in how you guys worked together? Did they recognize you and your value, and did you understand where they're coming from? Talk me through a little bit of that.
Well, mentoring is probably the most personally rewarding thing that I have done in my career. And being at Stanford with all these incredibly talented young people, I realized that that's my superpower. And on campus, I started a mentoring program between my program and the Women in Business Club, and connected people in my program with students who were looking for that kind of assistance. What I find is that they treat me like a peer with a lot more experience and wisdom. And I love that. I love learning about the drama of the intramural basketball team on campus and the parties that they went to. And I love, it makes you feel like you're 18 again. And at the same time, you've got, 50 years of collected experience and wisdom that they are dying to tap into. So I feel that I have received much more than I've actually given in these relationships, but they are so grateful for the help, especially these young people who are around the world in situations where they do not have access to the kind of networks that we take for granted and the life experience that we take for granted at this age. They are so grateful to have someone that they can speak to as a peer, but brings so much experience and wisdom to the table.
Are these opportunities that you've mentioned, were they something that you purposefully went out and searched, or was it more of an organic type of thing that appeared to you and then you decided to follow through?
Much more organic, but I'm always scanning the landscape for interesting opportunities. And then I apply and, the magic happens.
When you went back to the East Coast, and I love the idea of community purpose and wellness. What did that look like for you in practice?
What was unexpected is that I came back during COVID. So it's one thing to intellectualize what this could look like in
Uh-huh.
your next life. And then all of a sudden, your next life is completely different. So for me, I became part of a yoga community of my Stanford friends. And we started this for 40 days just to sort of get through this crazy thing called COVID. And we kept extending and extending. And we just had our 6th anniversary of practicing yoga together. And we tune in on Zoom from wherever we all are in the world. And we're in California and the East Coast and Europe and Asia. And I now have a yoga practice. Didn't see that coming. Uh, I hadn't practiced anything since I stopped practicing my violin. And now to think that I have a yoga practice, it's kind of hard to believe. I started a strength training class based on another friend's recommendation from Stanford. So that's now a part of my life. And I also have found that having some anchors at this part of our lives are really important. So in our schedules to have things that we plan for so we know what day of the week it is, it's really helpful. So So yes, I filled up my community bucket with my yoga community, even though I couldn't go anywhere and have a physical community. And at the same time, that also sort of filled up a wellness and a purpose bucket. And then I started the mentoring. And I also mentored a young man in a global competition at Stanford. And he was a kid from Nigeria, and he won first place in this amazing competition. And so I've been mentoring him for the last 5 years and just raised $80,000 so that he can go to Stanford, and he got accepted to graduate school.
In the mentoring practice that you had with this student, fascinating story. What was it that you brought to him, around how you mentored him to success and getting him to where he is now?
At first, it was about his project and helping him with his pitch
Yep.
that won the competition. After that, it was about giving him hope and giving him a mirror to see just how remarkable he was. There was no one in his life that was doing that for him.
Wow.
I went back to Stanford in 2023 after COVID to finish my program, and I brought him on campus. So I flew him from Nigeria to Stanford. I paid a kid to let him stay in his dorm room for a week, and organized all kinds of things for him to do on campus. And his head exploded. I mean,
Wow.
he was a guy who'd never left Nigeria, and all of a sudden he parachutes into Stanford. And it completely changed his life and his view of what was possible. And since that time, he's won so many different awards for the work he's done. He just won the Future Africa Award for education,
Sure.
which is like the Nobel Prize for Africans under 35. He's just been admitted to the Dalai Lama Fellows Program for next year. Like,
Wow.
now he's trying to get a visa, but who knows if that will be even possible.
So
Um,
the thing I love about this story, Susan, is the impact that you're having on him. We're worrying about, how do we going to manage ourselves? If we can reach out and start serving others, think of the impact that you can have. And just hearing you talk about that in what you did, enrolling with him through all of this, is inspiring, very inspiring.
but what I've found in the mentoring is my sweet spot is finding these extraordinary young people at an inflection point in their lives when I can really make a difference.
Uh-huh.
And most of the people that I have worked with through the Dalai Lama Fellow Program have made very dramatic career shifts in our work together. And I think that's my superpower.
That's great.
Yeah.
Susan, I want to bring something to full circle here. When we had a conversation prior to recording this episode, you shared with me that you had a very dear friend call you that just lost her job and she needed to be with you. And you spent some time together. Not talking about the particular instances of the situation and everything, but what did you say to that person, or what advice did you give them? Because it's sort of cool how you've talked about yourself being let go and all these wonderful things that you found. And now here somebody shows up at your door and says, I need a hug. How did that go?
Well, I made her a nice dinner, gave her a glass of wine, made a special detox foot bath for her. And then we just talked, and she shared how she wishes she had more close friends at this time and doesn't really know how to make those friends. She's 58. She knows that she will be subjected to age discrimination in the workplace. She's extremely talented. She used to work for me. We talked about what's the worst thing that could happen if she doesn't find another big corporate job. And we talked through different scenarios. I just made her feel loved and listened to and gave her hope and confidence. I just think that's being a good friend. That,
Mm.
we all go through transitions, and many of us don't recognize how many transitions we're managing at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky enough to find a class and take an online class in transitions during COVID, sponsored by the Modern Elder Academy, which is a great organization. I don't know if you've spoken about in other podcasts or not, but a terrific resource. And they have a wonderful paradigm to think about all kinds of transitions. The more that we understand and process those, the the better we get at doing it.
I really appreciate your approach on curiosity. I would like to think of myself as a naturally curious person. And I think to some degree, curiosity is a natural trait. We could have a long conversation about how much that can be learned and how much it can be discovered in yourself, or how much can you draw out of yourself a curiosity going forward. But for those folks who might be stuck. They found themselves out of a job, or they chose to retire and they didn't really have a launch pad planned for what's next. And they find themselves on the couch and they have watched everything on Netflix. How can someone awaken a curiosity in them, or what could be the first steps towards starting a journey of curiosity?
Well, I think there are so many resources available to us these days. Once you've finished all those Netflix series, um, go look for some videos and workshops about the things that appeal to you, or find a mentor or a coach or a psychologist if you're working through particular issues. As I said, there are organizations like the Modern Elder Academy that have so many fabulous workshops about midlife and beyond, and how to unleash your potential and how to find that superpower that you have been developing all of these years. And here's your opportunity to actually have the time to drill down and figure out how you can use this. I also think for me, it's all about focusing on others. This is the opportunity now to use all of that experience you have on behalf of the greater good. I would say directly to your question, Adam, a growth mindset is aligned with curiosity. You know, if you can see the fact that this life journey, we're always becoming, we're always changing. Now we're retired. Okay, well, we're not going to be the same next year as we are today. It's all a journey. I'm just so grateful that I have the opportunity to be on this journey. It's
Mm.
like life's great adventure. And then I think your friends, finding the right friend group. And if you don't have them now, go find them and, take that watercolor class you want, or that photography class, or learn to sail, or play the ukulele, whatever those things are that have been way in the back of your mind, just try one of them.
You're encouraging. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. You're getting me fired up. I understand now why you are a good mentor. You're inspiring. Your story is one that has brought you to this point, and I thank you so much for taking the time and inspiring us all, Susan. Thank you.
And I love the through thread of your life being curious, but where you ended up with mentoring and the power of mentoring. I think that's just one that is just out there for so many people, but you're going to have to make it happen. You're going to have to take a little risk. You're going to have to take those steps. You're going to have to go, look for the places where people need mentors, schools, universities, do powerful things. But I think it's fascinating, but we do have the opportunity to reach out and use that curious, that risk-taking step.
Susan, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for sharing your story and your experience with us and your story of resilience. And we really appreciate you joining us.
Interesting to hear that through all these transitions that happen in our life, like being fired, they're devastating potentially in the moment, but they end up turning out to be a blessing. And thank you for sharing your story on that as well. Very, very, very appreciative.
Well, if I could end with one thing,
Please.
On my last birthday, I went to a jazz concert and heard a song that the lyrics were just so perfect for me that I've adopted as my motto. I'm in love with my future. Can't wait to meet her.
Love
Billie
it.
Eilish.
You got it.
Love it.
Yeah.
Curt, you're very relevant.
So relevant.
It's a good song, Dale. You should listen to it.
I should. Susan, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
And thanks for joining us on the Redirect Podcast. A big thanks to the University of Cincinnati's 1819 Innovation Hub for allowing us to use the eSports recording studio to record today's podcast. Catch up on all the Redirect Podcast episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. To begin your Redirect journey, head over to redirect-u.com. Want to connect with the Redirect team? Feel free to email us at info@redirect-u.com. Remember, there's purpose in your life, so find it and go do something about it.
Hey, I've got one more comment. The Redirect Podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. We engage in an open, honest conversations about personal growth, life transitions, and the lessons we've learned through our own experiences. While we speak as experts in our own lives, we are not licensed therapists, medical professionals, or certified coaches. The content shared on the Redirect Podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of qualified professionals for any physical, mental, or emotional concerns that you may have. We're grateful to share this space with you and hope that our stories inspire reflection and connection. If you're in need of more support, we encourage you to connect with a trusted professional who can help.